The Balkans, a land of rugged mountains, winding rivers, and deep forests, is often called Europe's crossroads. Yet beneath its turbulent history lies a genetic story older than empires, older than kingdoms, older than recorded history itself. The DNA of Balkan populations carries the whispers of tens of thousands of years, revealing a past that few other regions in Europe can claim. To understand why Balkan DNA is so unique, we need to travel back to the Ice Age, over 20,000 years ago. While much of Europe was buried under massive glaciers, the Balkans remained one of the few habitable areas. Ancient humans who sought refuge here survived, hunted, and thrived. These Ice Age hunter-gatherers became the foundation of Europe's earliest genetic lineages, and their bloodlines, remarkably, have survived largely intact in the Balkans. Even today, DNA studies reveal traces of these ancient peoples, embedded deep in modern populations, linking the Balkans directly to Europe's prehistoric past. But survival in isolation was only the beginning. As the Ice Age ended and the climate warmed, new populations arrived. The Neolithic revolution, around 8,000 years ago, brought the first farmers from Anatolia. They introduced agriculture, pottery, and permanent settlements. Unlike other parts of Europe, these Neolithic farmers didn't completely replace the hunter-gatherers in the Balkans. Instead, they mixed with them. This fusion created a genetic tapestry unlike anywhere else, a combination of some of the oldest European lineages with fresh genetic influences from the Near East. As the Bronze Age dawned, another wave of migration reshaped Europe, the Indo-Europeans from the Pontic-Caspian steppe. These people were skilled horsemen, metal workers, and warriors. Their arrival introduced Y-DNA lineages that would go on to define many European populations. Yet in the Balkans, they didn't erase what was already there. Instead, they blended with the ancient hunter-gatherers and Neolithic farmers, creating an enduring genetic mosaic. This balance between continuity and integration is one of the first reasons why Balkan DNA stands apart from the rest of Europe. Even as civilizations rose and fell, the Balkans remained a melting pot that preserved the old while embracing the new. Tribes like the Thracians, Illyrians, and Dacians, whose names are barely remembered in history books, left a permanent imprint on the region's genetic code. These peoples were never fully assimilated or erased. Their DNA remains visible in modern populations, proof of a continuity that stretches back thousands of years. It's this extraordinary combination, Ice Age hunter-gatherers, Anatolian farmers, Bronze Age warriors, and local tribal populations that sets the foundation for the unique genetic identity of the Balkans. Unlike regions that saw repeated waves of replacement, the Balkans acted as a refuge, a genetic time capsule, preserving the layers of human history in a single, remarkable population.
As the centuries passed, the Balkans became a stage for some of history's greatest empires. The Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines all sought control of this strategic peninsula. Each left marks on the culture, the architecture, and the languages. Yet when it comes to DNA, the story is far more surprising. Take the Romans, for example. The empire stretched across the continent, spreading its law, its roads, and its cities. Across Europe, Roman rule often left a noticeable genetic footprint. Soldiers settled in new lands, intermarried with locals, and their descendants carried Italic DNA for generations. But in the Balkans, something unusual happened. Despite centuries of Roman occupation, modern genetic studies show that Italic DNA barely left a mark. There is almost no trace of Roman paternal or maternal lineages in the region today. Instead, the DNA evidence reveals a massive influx of populations from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, during the Roman period. These Anatolian groups integrated with the local Balkan population, leaving a genetic signature that endures even now. It seems that Rome's power in the Balkans relied more on culture than on colonization. Roman roads, cities, and governance transformed everyday life, but the local people remained genetically distinct. Romanization was a matter of language, law, and lifestyle, not of DNA. This distinction between cultural influence and genetic influence is key to understanding the uniqueness of Balkan DNA. While other regions in Europe experienced replacement or heavy admixture, the Balkans absorbed new ideas and technologies without losing their genetic roots. The ancient lineages of Thracians, Illyrians, and Dacians continued quietly, blending with newcomers rather than being erased. Even after Rome, the region remained a crossroads. The Balkans saw Goths, Huns, and Avars sweep through the landscape. Historical records tell of brutal invasions, massive battles, and migrations. Yet the genetic legacy of these so-called barbarian groups is surprisingly limited. A few markers of steppe ancestry appear. Some skeletal remains show skull deformations linked to nomadic practices. But these groups left no lasting footprint on the gene pool. Many were absorbed into local communities or moved on, failing to establish enduring populations. The Anatolian influence, however, remained. DNA evidence shows that the Balkans became a unique blend of local European lineages and Eastern Mediterranean ancestry. This combination, ancient hunter-gatherers, Neolithic farmers, Bronze Age warriors, and now Anatolian migrants, helped the region preserve a deeply layered genetic structure that survived successive waves of conquest. In essence, the Romans reshaped the Balkans in the ways that mattered politically and culturally, but genetically, the peninsula remained its own world. The DNA tells a story of resilience. It preserves a core foundation that predates empires, a thread of continuity that runs through thousands of years, untouched by the largest power in Europe. This balance of cultural adaptation without genetic replacement is one of the hallmarks of Balkan uniqueness. And this was just the beginning. The early medieval period would bring perhaps the most dramatic genetic transformation yet, the arrival of the Slavs. But even then, the ancient DNA of the Balkans would refuse to vanish, blending instead with the new arrivals to maintain the region's distinctive identity.
The early medieval period brought one of the largest and most transformative population movements in European history, the Slavic migrations. Entire communities speaking Slavic languages moved south from the forests of Eastern Europe into the Balkans. This was not a mere trickle of settlers, it was a flood of people, reshaping the cultural and linguistic landscape of the region almost overnight. Genetically, the Slavs introduced new lineages into the Balkans. Wide DNA markers associated with Slavic populations spread rapidly, creating a significant genetic footprint in the northern and central parts of the peninsula. In modern populations, these markers account for 30 to 60% of ancestry in areas like Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia. Yet what is truly remarkable is what happened to the ancient DNA already present in the region. The pre-Slavic Balkan lineages, those of the Thracians, Illyrians, Dacians, and the earliest European hunter-gatherers, weren't erased. Instead, they merged with the newcomers. The mountains, valleys, and isolated villages of the Balkans acted as natural fortresses, preserving ancient genetic pockets. These lineages survived, blending subtly with Slavic ancestry, creating a complex mosaic that makes Balkan DNA distinct. The further south you travel, the more the genetic influence of the Slavs diminishes. In Greece, Albania, and parts of the southern Balkans, Slavic markers exist but are much less prominent. Here, the deeper pre-Slavic genetic heritage dominates, preserving the ancient European, Anatolian, and Bronze Age signals. This gradient of ancestry shows that even dramatic migrations didn't overwrite the region's genetic history. They layered upon it. This fusion of populations is one reason Balkan DNA is so unique. Unlike Western Europe, which experienced repeated waves of migration that often replaced older lineages, the Balkans retained continuity. New groups arrived, but they merged with the existing populations rather than displacing them entirely. This layered integration created a genetic landscape that is both incredibly diverse and remarkably stable over time. The Slavic migrations also help explain some of the linguistic and cultural patterns still visible today. Regions with stronger Slavic ancestry often correspond to Slavic languages and traditions, while areas where pre-Slavic DNA remains dominant tend to retain unique dialects, customs, and folklore. Genetics and culture, in this sense, move together, revealing the intricate tapestry of Balkan identity. Even as empires rose and fell, the Byzantines, the Ottomans, and later the Austro-Hungarians, the Slavic-infused populations maintained their continuity. Ottoman rule, lasting centuries in many regions, brought new cultural influences, yet the genetic footprint of Turkish populations remained surprisingly limited. Instead, the ancient and Slavic layers continued to define the core DNA of the Balkans. This persistence is a testament to the region's geography and its people's resilience. The mountains and valleys not only slowed invaders, but also protected local populations from complete genetic replacement. The Balkans became a mosaic of micro-populations, each carrying ancient hunter-gatherer, Neolithic farmer, Bronze Age warrior, Anatolian and Slavic DNA, blended in unique ways across different regions. In short, the Slavic migrations were transformative, yet they didn't erase the past. They enriched it. They became another layer in a genetic story that stretches back over 20,000 years, creating a living record of human history, migration, and survival. Balkan DNA is, in essence, a testament to endurance, adaptation, and fusion, where the old and the new coexist in a delicate, centuries-old balance.
One of the most striking features of Balkan DNA is its remarkable preservation of ancient lineages. While much of Europe experienced repeated waves of migration that reshaped entire populations, the Balkans maintained pockets of continuity that are virtually unmatched elsewhere on the continent. The secret lies in geography. The Balkans are a land of rugged mountains, deep valleys, dense forests, and isolated plateaus. These natural barriers fragmented human populations over millennia, creating micro-regions where genetic lineages could survive in relative isolation. In these remote communities, ancient hunter-gatherer DNA mingled with Neolithic farmer and Bronze Age lineages, often untouched by later waves of conquest. Even Slavic migrations and Ottoman expansions, which reshaped much of Europe culturally and linguistically, failed to completely erase these ancient signals. These isolated populations act as living genetic time capsules. In some villages of Montenegro, Albania, and northern Greece, researchers have found Y-DNA haplogroups dating back to the Ice Age. Haplogroup I2, associated with the earliest European hunter-gatherers, still dominates certain Western Balkan regions. This continuity is extraordinary. In much of Western Europe, Ice Age lineages were largely replaced by Neolithic farmers or later migrations. But here they survive, a testament to the enduring resilience of the local gene pool. Genetic studies also show that mitochondrial DNA, passed down maternally, retains remarkable stability in the Balkans. Unlike Y-DNA, which can reflect male-dominated migration patterns like warrior invasions, mitochondrial DNA preserves the continuity of local female lineages. This means that even as armies marched, empires conquered, and populations shifted, the women of the Balkans maintained ancestral threads that stretch back thousands of years.
The result is a region where both maternal and paternal lineages tell a story of survival, adaptation, and continuity. Beyond isolated mountains, the Balkans' fragmented geography created genetic diversity at an unusually fine scale. Just a few miles can separate villages with dramatically different DNA profiles. In one community, ancient Thracian or Illyrian markers may be dominant. In the next, Slavic ancestry may be more pronounced. This patchwork effect is rare in Europe. In France, Germany, or Italy, genetic changes tend to occur gradually across large regions. In the Balkans, they shift sharply, creating a rich mosaic of ancestry. Isolation didn't just preserve old lineages, it also enabled new adaptations. Populations living in harsh winters, rugged terrain, and isolated valleys developed genetic traits that helped them survive. Studies suggest that certain immune system markers common in Balkan populations may have evolved as defenses against plagues and diseases that repeatedly swept through Europe. Other traits, including bone density, muscle endurance, and even resistance to nutritional deficiencies, reflect centuries of living under physically demanding conditions. These ancient genetic enclaves also reveal unexpected links to distant regions. Some mitochondrial lineages along the Adriatic and Aegean coasts trace back to Bronze Age maritime cultures, connecting the Balkans to the wider Mediterranean. Trade networks, seafaring migrations, and cultural exchanges brought subtle genetic influences from the Levant, Egypt, and even the Iberian Peninsula, blending into the local DNA while leaving the core lineages intact. The Balkans' mountains, rivers, and forests were more than natural defenses. They were guardians of identity. They allowed the region to absorb new influences without losing the genetic essence of its earliest inhabitants. This is why, even after millennia of wars, migrations, and empires, Balkan DNA retains an extraordinary continuity. It is a mosaic that reflects the past and the persistence of life in a region that has long been Europe's meeting point, battleground, and crossroads. In essence, the Balkans are a living genetic museum. Every valley, plateau, and remote village carries whispers of ancient hunters, farmers, warriors, and migrants. DNA here is not merely a record of who came and went. It is a story of survival, resilience, and the unique capacity of human populations to endure, adapt, and thrive against the pressures of time, geography, and history.
While large-scale migrations, like those of the Slavs, left the most visible imprint on Balkan DNA, the region's genetic story is also shaped by countless smaller movements. These were migrations that history often overlooks: merchants, refugees, soldiers, and settlers whose presence was subtle, yet whose genes left lasting marks. During the Roman and Byzantine periods, the Balkans exported people as well as absorbed them. Balkan-born soldiers, officials, and mercenaries spread across the empire, while traders from distant lands settled in coastal cities. Armenian merchants traveling Ottoman trade routes, Sephardic Jews fleeing persecution in Spain, and small groups of Germanic tribes passing through during the collapse of Rome all introduced new genetic threads. These minor but continuous migrations were often geographically limited, yet they enriched the local gene pool and added layers to the complex DNA mosaic. The Ottoman period provides another intriguing example. While the empire ruled the Balkans for centuries, its genetic impact was surprisingly limited. Modern studies show that Turkish ancestry in Balkan populations is small, even in regions under prolonged Ottoman control. Culture, religion, architecture, and language spread far more widely than genes. The Balkans were shaped politically and socially, but the ancient genetic foundation, the mix of hunter-gatherer, Neolithic farmer, Bronze Age warrior, Anatolian, and Slavic lineages remained intact. Even barbarian invasions, long recorded in historical texts, left relatively minor genetic traces. The Huns, Goths, and Avars swept through the peninsula,
leaving destruction in their wake, but few settled in numbers large enough to alter the gene pool significantly. Some steppe ancestry and skull deformations appear in skeletal remains, but these are exceptions rather than the rule. Most invaders were absorbed into local populations or moved on, leaving behind only faint traces in the DNA. Trade networks and maritime connections also played a subtle role. Coastal regions along the Adriatic and Aegean seas show genetic influences from ancient Mediterranean seafarers. Mitochondrial lineages suggest connections to cultures as far as Egypt, the Levant, and the Iberian Peninsula. These influences were often limited to small communities, yet they added unique layers to the genetic fabric of the Balkans, further distinguishing the region from inland Europe. Interestingly, even small-scale movements within the Balkans shaped local diversity. Villages separated by mountains, rivers, or forests often developed sharply distinct genetic profiles. This meant that neighboring communities, only a few kilometers apart, could carry very different combinations of ancient and more recent lineages. Over centuries, these micro-differences compounded, producing a patchwork of genetic variation that is among the most intricate in Europe. The interplay between large migrations and minor movements demonstrates a key principle. Balkan DNA is resilient, yet adaptable. It absorbs newcomers, mixes them into the local gene pool, but preserves deep ancestral roots. The region's history of conquest, trade, and migration did not erase the past, it layered upon it, creating a genetic landscape that is both extraordinarily diverse and remarkably stable. This cumulative effect of major and minor migrations also helps explain unexpected genetic connections. Some modern Balkan populations share lineages with Anatolian, Central Asian, and Middle Eastern groups, evidence of historical trade, conquest, and cultural exchange. These connections challenge traditional narratives that portray the Balkans as isolated. In reality, the region has always been a bridge, a meeting point where Europe, Asia, and the Mediterranean intersected, not just geographically, but genetically. In the end, the uniqueness of Balkan DNA is not defined by any single migration or empire. It is the result of a dynamic interplay. Ancient hunter-gatherers, Neolithic farmers, Bronze Age warriors, Slavic settlers, minor migratory groups, and regional isolation, all layered together over thousands of years. The DNA of the Balkans is a living record, one that reflects resilience, adaptation, and the complex tapestry of human history.
The story of Balkan DNA is, at its core, a story of survival. It is the tale of a land that has witnessed empires rise and fall, migrations sweep through, wars rage, and yet, through it all, its people carried forward the genetic legacy of tens of thousands of years. Ancient hunter-gatherers, Neolithic farmers, Bronze Age warriors, Anatolian migrants, Slavic settlers, and countless smaller groups all have left their mark, blending into a living mosaic that is as unique as it is resilient. Balkan DNA is more than just sequences and markers. It is a narrative of endurance, of adaptation to rugged mountains, harsh winters, and centuries of conflict. It is a story written not in history books alone, but in the very cells of the people who call this land home. Every valley, every remote village, every coastal town preserves a chapter of human history, from the Ice Age to the modern era. What makes the Balkans extraordinary is not just the layers of ancestry, but the way those layers coexist. Unlike many regions of Europe, where migration often replaced earlier populations, the Balkans absorbed new arrivals while keeping the old alive. Ancient lineages remain, blended yet intact, proving that survival and continuity are as important as conquest and change. So the next time you think of the Balkans, remember this. Beneath the stories of division, conflict, and empire lies a genetic masterpiece, a living testament to endurance, diversity, and history itself. The DNA of the Balkans is not just unique, it is irreplaceable, a bridge connecting Europe's past to its present, and a window into the resilience of human life.